The mother-in-law said, "The labor pains have started, and it usually takes about 10 hours. So the baby will be born before noon, right? Don't be so weak, you housemaid. Stop being lazy and prepare the meal." Overwhelmed by the mother-in-law's abusive words and the intense pain of labor, I collapsed to my knees. My name is Emily, and I am 32 years old. My husband John is 34 years old. It was a commonplace office romance. Currently, I am on parental leave and working as a full-time housewife. We were blessed with a baby after a year of marriage. Let's build our own home now that we're having a child. My husband and I agreed. And we built our dream home. In our newly built home, filled with the scent of fresh wood, I was overwhelmed with joy and anticipation, thinking, I've started a family. In this house, I will wait for a new life, a new family. However, I had no idea that this home would become the stage for an unbelievable showdown. On the day we moved into our completed home, my in-laws came to help, or so they said. Indeed, they helped, but as soon as my father-in-law stepped out, my mother-in-law demanded, "Give me a duplicate key to your house." Yeah. Even if she is my mother-in-law, why would I need to give her the keys to her house? When I was about to refuse, my husband said, "That's fine. I'm going out to shop for food, so I'll get a duplicate key made." Yeah. Both parent and child, what an absurdity. Is my sense of values wrong? Confused, I looked at my husband, who said, "A lively house is better, right? I want a home where people gather." You're pregnant, and you'd want support, wouldn't you? I was dumbfounded and speechless at his words. My bad feeling came true. Every morning at 9 o'clock, my mother-in-law would come to our house, bringing her laundry. "Doing laundry for 2 or 4 people is the same," she would say, handing me the basket full of laundry with a broad smile. And while I was doing laundry, she would nag, "Isn't breakfast ready yet?" Trying to contain my irritation, I asked, "Didn't you eat at home?" To which she replied, "I fed my husband. He has early work in the morning. But I have time, so I decided to have breakfast here, breakfast at my place." Our usual breakfast is just coffee and toast for my early rising husband and melon bread for me. But when my mother-in-law visits, I have to add salad and soup to the menu. She arrogantly named it Special Morning and made it a routine to eat it every weekday morning. She would also have lunch, and for dinner, she would apply the same logic as the laundry, smiling as she packed half of the food I made into containers to take home. One day, after living like this for about 3 months, I've always been the one cooking. "Could you please help with dinner preparation once in a while?" I tried asking. Then she snapped, "You're ordering your husband's mother around. You have no respect for your elders." I was trained the same way by my mother-in-law. I don't need a cheeky daughter-in-law who talks back. Just do what you're supposed to do, quickly. I was so taken aback, I couldn't respond. Come to think of it, my mother-in-law has only ever referred to me as you or this person. While ignoring her scolding, I vaguely thought about this. Hey, about your mother. Frustrated with my mother-in-law's behavior, I tried talking to my husband. But he was of no help, saying, "There's a saying. Old age and treachery will always beat youth and exuberance. Whatever mother says is right, that's common sense in society." And so, I continued living this way until my final month of pregnancy. One day, my labor pains finally started. They began in the middle of the night, and with the pain coming at regular intervals, it was naturally impossible for me to do any housework. Amidst this, my mother-in-law entered our house without ringing the bell, using her duplicate key. She stomped her feet loudly, marching straight into the living room. "What? You haven't prepared the meal yet? You're so slow. Hurry up and do it." As usual, my mother-in-law yelled at me, full of arrogance. Normally, I would at least greet her reluctantly with a hello, but at that moment, the labor pains were so intense that even her yelling seemed distant. My sweat dripped onto the floor. "Sorry, I need to go to the hospital. I am having labor pains." My voice was intermittent, matching the waves of pain. Labor pains usually last about 10 hours before the baby is born. "It's not time to go to the hospital yet. Don't be such a wimp, housemaid. Isn't breakfast ready yet?" I couldn't respond to her angry shouts and writhed in pain. "Help, dear." My vision blurred, and my consciousness started to fade. I clung to my husband's knee, who was reading the newspaper nearby. However, my husband closed the newspaper, lightly brushed my hand away, and said, "If Mom says it takes time from labor pains to birth, then it must be true. She's given birth to 3 children after all. It's already past 9 o'clock. Isn't breakfast ready yet?" At that moment, I couldn't bear it any longer and screamed. My water broke, and I was somehow taken to the hospital in an ambulance and received treatment. It's a healthy baby boy. After giving birth, while I was dazed in the hospital room, a nurse spoke to me kindly. "You should have called the hospital when the labor pains were 5 minutes apart. You endured too much." I asked my mother-in-law and my husband to take me to the hospital, but they said it was still too early. As I explained the situation, the nurse sighed and asked worriedly, "Hey, can you go back to that mother-in-law's house and raise your child well?" True to the nurse's words, even after giving birth, I would still be called you and this person and treated like a housemaid. Holding my newborn, I wondered if I could manage. My anxiety must have shown on my face. The nurse comforted me, saying, "You're becoming a mother now. Protecting yourself means protecting your child. Take care of yourself for your child's sake." For my child, I must take care of myself. That's right. I made up my mind. The nurse patted my back with a smile. Without peace of mind for the mother, you can't properly handle breastfeeding, night crying, or even giving affection. For my child, I need to become strong. I have to be strong. While looking at my baby's hand, I clenched my trembling palm. When I returned home from the maternity hospital with my baby, there was my usual tormentor, my mother-in-law. "The housemaid is back." As soon as I entered the house, she sneered. However, my resolve was entirely different this time. I dropped my sports bag filled with hospital things onto the floor, stood up straight, took a deep breath, and then I yelled with a voice that echoed in the living room, "I am not a housemaid." My mother-in-law, who had never expected such a cry from me, shuddered and contorted her face. My husband also put down the newspaper he was reading and stared at me in shock. Old age and treachery will always beat youth and exuberance. That's laughable. You arbitrarily decided the labor would last 10 hours, and look at this hospital commotion. What's the merit of age? Just a waste of oxygen and a producer of carbon dioxide. I was surprised by my strong voice. The living room fell silent. I won't be silent anymore. I won't be submissive. To protect my child, I will protect myself as a mother. That's how I began my turnaround. The next day, my husband John went to work. We hadn't spoken since yesterday. I didn't know if he thought the housemaid treatment was wrong, or if he was just shocked by my sudden outburst, but he ate his toast quietly and left. After John left for work, I had an hour before my mother-in-law would come. During that time, I called a locksmith and had the front door lock changed. Now my mother-in-law couldn't enter with her old key. At 9 a.m., as expected, there was the sound of someone trying to open the front door with a lot of noise. The doorbell rang incessantly, followed by loud banging and my mother-in-law's voice yelling, "What's going on? Why won't you open the door? Stop this nonsense. Are you playing games?" Her voice continued. Without hesitation, I dialed 110 on my smartphone. It's an unlawful entry. Soon, a patrol car arrived in response to the silent alarm. My mother-in-law's shouting ceased, and it seemed like she was being questioned. When the police asked me what happened, I feigned ignorance. Before I knew it, they had taken my mother-in-law away. I returned to the living room, had some tea, and then breastfed my baby when he cried. The baby's skin was so soft and cute. I couldn't bear the thought of this little life being tainted by my mother-in-law. I had every right to get angry. Then, past 8 p.m., again, there was the sound of someone trying to open the front door. The doorbell rang incessantly. The ringing was followed by a call from my husband John on my smartphone. "What's going on? I couldn't stand your mother anymore." "So I changed the locks and banned her from entering," I replied calmly. "Huh? Didn't I say I wanted a home where people gather?" he blustered. I retorted, "I prefer a quiet home, a place where our family can relax. I've accommodated your wish for a year, right? Now it's time for my wish. Above all, I don't want to raise our baby in a tense environment." "Wait, didn't my mom help us?" As he continued to argue, I firmly said, "It was nothing but a nuisance. Even if your mother thought she was helping, I'm the one who evaluates that. And I'll never forget how she exploited me under the guise of wisdom of age. Once my maternity leave is over, I intend to return to work. I don't mind if we don't see each other anymore. I'll even tell everyone at work that you made me work until my water broke." I ended the call definitively. Afterward, I heard the sound of a car engine. Realizing John had resigned himself to go to his parents' house, I continued to watch TV, breastfed my baby when he cried, and fell asleep holding my warm, cozy baby. As expected, the next day I received a call from my father-in-law. "I want to hear the reason for all this. Knowing your gentle nature, if you're this angry, it must mean my wife and son did something terrible, but I've only heard their side of the story." My father-in-law sounded flustered on the phone. I said, "I never want your wife, especially, to enter this house again, so I will visit you this weekend. Thinking about it, it's a 1 versus 2 battle between me, John, and his mother, but I have my baby to protect. I cannot afford to lose." I prepared for the weekend showdown by rehearsing potential conversations. So I went to my in-laws' house with my baby. "Oh, how cute," said my mother-in-law as she reached out to touch the baby. I quickly brushed her hand away. "Don't touch him, you," after sending me to the hospital in an ambulance. Surprised by my use of "you," my mother-in-law blinked and stammered, "Yeah. These are the very words you've always used with me. Don't get flustered just because you're on the receiving end now," I returned her tone with equal roughness. An ambulance. Hearing it for the first time, my father-in-law looked confused. See, she hadn't told him. "Your wife almost killed me. I begged for help during unbearable labor pains, but was ignored. She even said, 'Housemaid, isn't the meal ready yet?' In the end, my water broke right there, and I was taken away in an ambulance," I said directly to my father-in-law. "What?" He was wide-eyed with surprise. "This is the proof." I slammed the emergency transport certificate on the table. A certificate with the fire chief's seal is given to those transported by ambulance. I had saved it for this day. My counterattack was far from over. First of all, since the day we moved into our new home, your wife, I laid everything bare to my father-in-law. How she came over every morning for the so-called special morning, expecting breakfast. How she brought her laundry for me to wash. She had me make all the dinners and take them home in containers. All this, right up until my water broke. I had no idea. I leave early for work every morning. He looked utterly dejected. But I suspected I might be eating the meals you cooked. The taste changed suddenly. I knew it. But I believed her when she said she was trying new recipes. In a marriage, the worst thing is lies. He spoke in a strained voice. Though my father-in-law was unaware, he was still complicit as her husband. But your wife said, I was also bullied by my mother-in-law. So you ignored your wife being bullied by her mother-in-law, just like my husband does, right? I accused my father-in-law. What? He seemed shocked by my story, briefly reeling back. My mother was already in heaven when we got married. It was my turn to be surprised. What? Everything my mother-in-law said was a lie. So, you were deceived by lies, and I was victimized by them, right? I asked, seeking confirmation. My father-in-law looked down, his face filled with regret. Yes, it seems so. I decided to deliver the final ultimatum to my mother-in-law. Is it acceptable for you to barge into your son and daughter-in-law's home? Treat me as a housemaid under the guise of being a mother-in-law. I can't raise my child in such a heartless environment. Hey, are you listening? I'm talking to you, the liar and manipulator. I had forgotten to address her as mother-in-law, like she did to me. Calling her this woman or you was sufficient. Then my father-in-law said, my wife's lies are inexcusable. But my son is equally responsible for turning a blind eye. John and his mother had nothing to say in response. Both of you are nothing but harmful to my baby's growth. Protecting myself means protecting my baby. To safeguard my child, I'm ending this relationship now. I presented the green paper I had prepared, and then I returned to work. When I resumed my job, I had thought of exposing the terrible treatment by my ex-husband John and ex-mother-in-law. But by the time I came back, John had already left the company. Probably he was afraid of being the subject of gossip. Moreover, my mother-in-law was divorced by my father-in-law. His sense of justice was deeply stirred by the continuous lies his wife told him and the bullying she inflicted on me. My ex-mother-in-law was told by my father-in-law, never show your face to me again, and she moved far away. And so, peace returned to our lives. Occasionally, my father-in-law would visit and beam with joy at the sight of his grandson. He's adorable, so tiny. When he brandished a toy as a gift, my son laughed joyfully. I want to protect this small, precious smile. May he grow up healthy, strong, and resilient. I named my son Hierarchy, inspired by a tree known for its vitality and flexibility, a symbol of a strong and supple life.
I will protect your daughter forever. I heard a voice declaring this in a shy tone, and I stopped myself. After all, the voice I heard was my husband's. I slowly turned around to see my husband and my best friend, who were smiling happily with their arms around each other. As I blankly tried to comprehend the situation, a joyful atmosphere filled the space before me. I snapped back to reality and, passed in a smile on my face, pushed through the crowd to move forward. When I appeared in front of my husband and best friend, I ignored their surprised, wide-eyed faces and climbed onto the stage. The two, looking at me, said nothing and tightly embraced each other as if protecting one another. I smiled warmly at them and scanned the increasingly noisy venue to silence it. Then, after taking the microphone from my husband, I took a deep breath and introduced myself firmly. I am a wife who was not protected by my husband. My name is Amelia, a 26-year-old housewife. My family runs a high-end Italian restaurant, and I have been helping out there even after getting married. I have had a good friend since high school. Her name is Zyla. She is what I would call a best friend. Isla is flashy, but has a bright personality and can be considerate to anyone, a kind person. Of course, she is the same towards me, and when we first became classmates in high school, she slowly spoke to me seeing how nervous I was. From there, we gradually started talking, and now we're best friends who can talk about anything. Isla and I graduated from high school and entered the same university, continuing our close friendship as before. When we joined the same club and were enjoying our time, we met Alexander. At that time, Alexander, a fourth-year student at the university, was the leader of the club. His kind, sincere, and reliable demeanor attracted me. Isla soon found out about it, and I asked her for advice on various matters. When it was time for Alexander to graduate, Isla told me to ask him out for a date. I hadn't planned to go that far, but I decided to ask him due to Isla's strong encouragement. The result was successful. Alexander and I started dating and got married when I graduated from university. However, per my wish, we didn't have a ceremony. After greeting each other's parents, we just submitted our marriage registration. Thus, Alexander and I became husband and wife and rented a new apartment to live in. Although my parents suggested a single-family home, they were convinced when Alexander declared he would build one in the future. Our initial marital life seemed smooth. While diligently working, Alexander thoughtfully saved for our future and was very kind to me. One day, I made a proposal to Alexander. It was when Alexander, busy with work, unusually came home early. We were sitting on the living room sofa, leisurely enjoying our time together. Seizing the moment when the conversation paused, I told Alexander that I wanted a child.
Right, that's right. Well, I'll think about that and work even harder at my job.
Alexander, who gave a slightly misaligned answer, understood that raising a child would be costly. Honestly, if we said a word to my parents, we would have some financial flexibility, but it seemed Alexander didn't want to do that. When we moved to our new home and declined my parents' suggestion, I asked Alexander why he refused to have from them. Apparently, he wanted us to manage our lives by ourselves. I was deeply impressed by Alexander. Likewise, it seemed he wanted to raise our child with our own capabilities, since it would be our child. I was so impressed by Alexander's thoughtfulness that I said nothing more. However, there were occasions when even the reliable Alexander seemed dubious. It happened about 2 years after we got married. I told Alexander again that I wanted a child soon.
It's about time for that, isn't it? Understood. I'll study up on child rearing.
I couldn't say anything to Alexander, who was smiling brightly. Perhaps I was being gently rejected. That suspicion crossed my mind, and I couldn't speak any further. Moreover, Alexander, who hadn't been like this at first, began to come home late gradually, since he said he would study child rearing. Alexander became a working adult before me and had also found employment. Therefore, it was natural for him to get busier at his position as the company rose. However, starting to come home after the day changed, or suddenly saying he had a drinking party and not coming home right after I brought up the topic of children, no matter how I thought about it, was suspicious. When he came home late, I tried to make him relax a little, but he reacted to all of them in a distant way, as if he were running away from me. In addition, Alexander started doing things that were unimaginable before. Recently, He has begun visiting my parents' restaurant after work or nights out, and eating supper there. Although this was a welcome development, when Alexander, who has said he would try not to rely too much on my parents, brightly suggested,
Cooking every day must be tough, right? From now on, you should just eat at your parents' restaurant.
I almost dropped the plate I was holding. I decided to observe Alexander's actions more closely, noting his behaviors after coming home and while relaxing. And despite my best efforts to conceal it, I carefully watched to see if there were any signs of infidelity, something I had reluctantly begun to suspect. However, Alexander showed no such signs, and perhaps because my observation was too blatant, he began staying away from home more than ever. The absence of any communication, the nights he didn't come home, and the frequent instances of him returning when I was asleep and leaving before I awoke became common occurrences. Just as I was getting used to such a lifestyle, Alexander came home for dinner after a long time. What's going on? It's unusual for you to come home like this today. Without much thought, I spoke what was on my mind. I soon realized it might have been inappropriate, but Alexander, unbothered, replied in a nonchalant tone.
Yeah, I was going to be late because of work again today. But I got a certain business trip for tomorrow. I have to prepare now.
Saying this, Alexander, without wasting time on changing clothes, took a large suitcase from his room and began packing in a fluster. Occasionally, he would ask me where this or that was, and I found myself helping him back, equally flustered. After most of the packing was done, Alexander suddenly complained of hunger. Reluctantly, I served him the meal I had prepared for myself.
Amelia is cooking. It's been a while. Homemade meals really are the best.
After he polished off the meal, Alexander went straight to the bath and then to bed. I let out a deep sigh while cleaning up. The next day, before I woke up, it seemed Alexander had already left for his business trip. I wondered when he would return this time. In the end, Alexander did not tell me how long his business trip would be. He took about a week's worth of change of clothes, but probably he would use a coin laundry and cycle through them. Alone again in the house, I spent my days doing household chores and reading books, passing through the tasteless days. In the evening, I would go back to my parents' house and help out with the restaurant. 5 days of living this cycle since Alexander left for his business trip. On this day, for the first time in a really long time, there was a delivery order from Isla's house. Actually, since Isla was a lady, every time she had a party at home, she favored my parents' restaurant. Since graduating from university, Isla, who had joined the company for social studies to take over her family's business, probably hadn't had much opportunity to throw parties. Hearing from Isla after such a long time naturally brightened my voice. Amelia, it's been a while. Can I order food like before? It has been, hasn't it, Isla? Of course. What would you like to have? This time it was a small-scale party, so I took an order for 50 servings of pizza and pasta. To me, that still seemed like a lot, but for Isla, it was probably considered small-scale. I promptly told my parents about it, and decided to personally deliver it to Isla's house, since it had been a while. Then, on the day, when the ordered food was ready, I headed to Isla's house with high spirits. Although I wasn't interested in the content of the party, The possibility of meeting Isla made my heart flutter. I rang the doorbell and introduced myself. Then, the maid opened the door, letting me in with a, "It's been a while." I was guided to the hall, the venue, and laid out the ordered items on the table. The party itself seemed to have already started, with Isla's father giving a speech. I prepared quietly, not to disturb anyone, but none of the adults around showed any interest in me, the provider of the food. Just when I was about to finish the preparations, the adults behind me suddenly started to applaud loudly. Startled, I almost dropped the pizza I was holding, but managed to withstand it by taking a deep breath. Then I heard someone stepping onto the stage, and the speech began. However, the voice sounded familiar, and I, who was about to leave after finishing all preparations, involuntarily stopped in my tracks. The next words I heard froze my thoughts.
"I will protect your daughter for the rest of my life."
I could hear the voice declaring so, shyly, and my wind went black. That voice, which resonated throughout the hall, was the voice of my husband, Alexander. Slowly turning around in disbelief, there stood Alexander, arm in arm and smiling happily with Isla, my best friend. I just stared blankly, unable to comprehend the situation. A joyous atmosphere filled the space in front of me. I snapping back to reality, pasted a smile on my face, and decided to keep moving forward, pushing through the crowd. And when I stepped in front of Alexander and Isla, both of them gasped, holding their breath. Ignoring the two, who were looking at me as if they'd seen a monster and slowly backing away, I ascended the stage. And when I stepped down from the stage, the two were staring at me, still silently, holding each other tightly in a protective embrace. The whole venue became noisy at the bizarre sight of the two, and Isla's parents hurriedly questioned them about what was happening. But the two didn't answer. They just held each other and looked at me. I smiled warmly at them and glanced around the noisy venue, seeking to quieten it. As I looked around, the noise gradually subsided, and soon everyone there was waiting for my words. Confirming that, I suddenly turned back to the two, snatched the microphone from the frightened Alexander, took a deep breath, and introduced myself firmly. "Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am a wife who was not protected by my husband." Upon saying that, not only the invited adults, but also Isla's parents, opened their eyes wide in shock. Just from their reactions, it was clear that this was a plan by Isla and Alexander alone. I turned to Isla, who was panicking and arguing with Alexander, and kept my sweet smile as I decided to ask her, "Hey, Isla, are you getting married? With this man? Congratulations if so." When I called out to her, Isla held her breath and clung to Alexander. Alexander, in turn, clung to Isla, so that it almost looked as if I was the villain. Not being satisfied with that, I decided to explain the current situation to the people in the venue who were not Isla and Alexander carefully. "Ladies and gentlemen, you were probably gathered here today for these two's engaged announcement party. But that is a mistake. This party is not an engagement announcement, but an infidelity announcement, so please don't be mistaken." Upon saying that, not only the venue, but also Isla's parents raised their voices even more. So, I decided to report the detailed situation and question the two. First of all, Alexander is my husband. I did not have a wedding party because I did not want one, but we had our marriage registered. And the lady next to him, Isla, has been my friend since we were high school students. In other words, I was betrayed by my best friend and husband a while ago. But is this a coincidence? I said the last part while facing Isla and Alexander. However, no reply came from the two, and I shrugged my shoulders. Then, Isla's mother said she had not heard about my marriage. With those words, I realized what Isla had intended. Isla had been targeting Alexander since I got married, or perhaps even before that. When I glanced at Isla, she was biting her lip and glaring at me. And when our eyes met, she threw Alexander aside and snapped at me. "Stop spouting nonsense! I did not betray you!" I sighed at Isla, who started saying things without any persuasive power at this point, and continued the conversation. "Everyone, did you hear that? Isla said she hadn't betrayed me. But what exactly does that mean? Who is this Isla who fully supported me dating Alexander? And who was the first to be overjoyed at my marriage announcement?" "Stop it already! What's with that way of speaking? It's infuriating. Someone, get her out of here!" Isla, shrieking, is silenced by a stern voice from her father. Until now, her parents, who have no knowledge of the situation, seem to want to hear the story from me. If that's the case, I must make sure to convey it to everyone present, especially to Isla's parents. As I mentioned earlier, it's thanks to Isla that Alexander and I started dating. And when we announced our marriage, it was Isla who was very happy for us. But why are Isla and Alexander trying to get married somewhere I don't know about now? This time, instead of confronting an infuriated Isla, I passed the conversation to Alexander, who looks pathetic and perplexed. As expected, when Alexander is pointed out by name, he shivers and can only say things that do not form coherent words. Losing my patience, I carefully choose my words and try asking him again. "I'm asking you why you're trying to marry Isla while married to me. Was it a lie when you said you'd protect Isla forever a moment ago? Or was our marriage itself a lie?"
I didn't lie about anything."
At my accusatory tone, Alexander raises his voice as if trying to say he's sincere. Either way, his words were insincere, but it didn't matter to me at that moment. Yes, then isn't this situation strange? You're married to me and you're protecting Nyla for the rest of her life? I'm sorry, but this country doesn't allow polygamy or even bigamy. Saying that, Alexander, with a face about to cry, begins to speak.
"No, that's not it. Sure, at first I wanted to marry Isla, but Isla was popular, and I thought she wouldn't pay attention to someone like me. But she was always with you, so I thought if I got along with you, maybe I could also become friends with Isla."
Hearing that, I felt like my insides were boiling, but I decided to pretend to be calm and make sure everyone present heard everything. "So, you approached me to get Isla, and from the start, you intended to avoid the topic of children because of that, right?"
"That's right, because I plan to marry Isla. If a child is born between you and me, I can't break up with you, can I?"
Alexander provided an honest answer, even though I hoped he would deny it. While I desperately suppressed my anger, he began to speak one after another even without being asked. It's as if he thinks that if he revealed everything, I will forgive him.
Besides, your family runs a high-end Italian restaurant, and your parents are nice people. So they'll treat me to a lot of delicacies, right? I thought it wouldn't be bad to be able to eat as much luxury food as I want, whenever I want.
I almost lashed out, but the moment I tried to step down from the stage, Isla, who had been silent until now, began to laugh loudly. Isn't it nice having a special feature? Actually, I didn't want to ask for anything from your restaurant, but I ordered because Alexander insisted. You should be grateful. And I never thought of you as my best friend from the start. You were just right to highlight me. And I've been using you all along. Finally, Isla showed her true colors. Whether she had given up on hiding it or gained confidence after hearing Alexander's evaluation of me, she began to disclose various things, seemingly having become audacious, just like Alexander. It was a long-term plan. I met Alexander in college and wanted to make him mine somehow. But he didn't have the courage himself. So I thought if I could make you steal him, Alexander himself would realize his charm, and once you became unnecessary, he could discard you. The hall becomes noisy again at Isla's outrageous statement. Isla's parents held their mouths, looking at their daughters as if they were seeing something unbelievable. Amidst this, Isla sticks tightly to Alexander and glares at me. Then Isla's father steps forward and bows to me. He also bows to the guests and says in a firm voice,
On this occasion, I sincerely apologize for our daughter exposing such an ugly side of herself. I deeply apologize for showing you such an unsightly scene.
And then, turning to face me again, he bowed and apologized.
Amelia, I'm truly sorry. I never imagined our daughter would grow up to be such a person. I don't know what to say. After all the friendly times you've shared since childhood, and this is how she repays you. I won't ask for your forgiveness, but could you please settle this matter calmly?
I understand that parents will defend their child no matter what they have done. But this is too much. If she shows no sign of remorse, I intend to bring this to light. At this exchange, Isla's face turned pale. A little distance away, Isla's mother was crying, and seeing that made Isla lose even more color. Seeing such Isla, Alexander was doing something of mark in an attempt to comfort her. Watching Isla in that state, Alexander tried to comfort her in all the wrong ways. He attempted to make her laugh, and even gestures as if he would raise his hand to me. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but wonder what I even saw in Alexander. Isla, annoyed by Alexander's actions, tries to distance herself, but he doesn't seem to understand. Watching their exchange, I suddenly lose interest and decided to deliver the final blow without hesitation. Well, now that your affair is out in the open, I'll claim damages from Isla and demand damages and a divorce from Alexander. Huh? Don't blame me just because you weren't attractive, okay? Isla, making a genuinely disgusted face, was causing her parents to panic. They remembered what I had said earlier about making things public, if Isla didn't show any remorse. Alexander is muttering that he can't pay something like that. Hesitantly, but I don't care. Annoyed at the sight of the two of them whining together, I firmly grabbed the microphone and said, "Alright, so I will make it public. Maybe you should experience what happens when you don't reflect properly, don't you think? Just as I'm about to step down from the stage, Isla's parents beg me desperately.
Amelia, we'll make it up to you. So please, just don't make it public. Please. Please, Amelia, just not public.
Seeing them defend Isla so desperately, it appears they are only thinking of themselves, using Isla as a reason. I frowned and looked towards Isla, but even upon seeing her parents, she showed no sign of remorse. Fed up with the current situation, I decided to really go for the kill. I don't know how long you plan on acting so smug, but your cheating will be exposed eventually, you know? At my words, Isla's eyes widened. Amidst the emerging chaos, where everyone present can hardly hide their surprise, I descend from the stage and speak clearly into the microphone. All your college classmates know you're playing around. Do you have any idea how many people have seen you with your convenient partners at any given time? The latest intel was just yesterday. You were seen going into a hotel with the man you were walking with. As soon as I finish speaking, Isla's father yells. Her mother starts crying hard, and Alexander is just flustered, unable to comprehend. The guests are also murmuring, and some even begin to offer eyewitness testimonies. Seizing the opportunity amidst the chaos, I throw down the microphone and make my escape from the scene. When I returned home in high spirits, my parents were just closing the restaurant a bit early. When I asked them why, they say they opened only to prepare an order for Isla's family. That being the case, I assist my parents in closing the shop, then share the recent happenings. My parents were outraged, but I urgently dissuaded them from going public, considering our restaurant's reputation. Relieved that my parents finally conceded, we discussed the next steps. The divorce is a given, and we would discuss things with Isla's family through the lawyer. Alexander, for some inexplicable reason, insisted that he did not want a divorce at this stage. But when I took the final step of explaining the situation to his parents, he readily admitted that he was divorcing me. Even if divorce is socially frowned upon, I felt anger boiling within me once again, as Alexander seemed to not comprehend why all of this happened. However, my in-laws, being sensible people, apologized both over the phone and in a direct visit. They also promised to ensure that Alexander would deal with the division of property, which was a relief for me. However, the problem lay with Isla, who, despite our communication through lawyers, visited without prior notice, stating she wanted to talk. Naturally, our restaurant was open for business that day, and I couldn't rudely dismiss her, so I invited her in. My mother and I spoke with her, but Isla's parents didn't say much, frantically trying to hand over a paper bag instead. When asked what was inside, they gave a vague reply, merely stating it was a token gesture. Frustrated, I asked again, and they revealed that it's money for an apology. With neither Isla present nor any attempt to communicate, just trying to hand over money, both my mother and I were completely infuriated. When I asked them whether they would rather have the police called for obstruction of business or leave now without leaving anything behind, Isla's parents fled and left. However, I successfully divorced and became unburdened. Isla and the others have not interfered since then, and my store is thriving as usual. Nevertheless, after such trouble occurred in a place I had become accustomed to, I could not genuinely find peace. Encouraged by my parents and having a substantial amount of savings, I bravely decided to move out of my parents' home and relocate far away. In this newly chosen location, I decided to realize something I have vaguely dreamt of. I have always loved cooking, especially baking. I couldn't forget how delighted my classmates were when I brought my homemade baking to school. And I had always wanted to open a cafe someday. Fortunately, I have some financial means, so while leisurely spending time in my new apartment, I'm planning to open a cafe. Although I've been through a lot, now, thinking about what's to come excites me, and I can't help but feel joyful.
Did I do something wrong? My wife's money is my money, right? Husband said, laughing. Emily is narrow-minded, she laughed along. Despite having tried my best as a wife, this is how I'm treated. Normally, it's not acceptable to use someone else's things without permission. Moreover, the amount of money they spent was huge. It was clear how difficult things would become from now on. What nonsense about, my wife's money is my money. What nonsense about being narrow-minded. It's wrong to be nice to these people. I'll make them fall into hell. So they can never climb back up, I'll push them to the very bottom. My name is Emily, a 45-year-old housewife. I live with my husband. My father-in-law passed away early, and my mother-in-law lives alone. Concerned for her, we decided to live near my husband's family home. I was against living here because of my husband's commute and, more importantly, because I didn't want to associate much with my mother-in-law. However, my husband insisted, I'm worried about Mom. And when he ran out of patience with my refusals, he even went to my parents' house. He told them about my inconsiderate behavior towards my mother-in-law and that he hadn't expected that I was this kind of wife. My parents then told me that I should take care of my mother-in-law's household. At least for appearances. My parents are still healthy, and my father is still working. As the owner of a company, my father has made it inevitable that my husband will take over. And maybe that's why they get along so well. My father praised my husband working at his company for training, saying, he's a very serious young man, but at home, my husband showed no signs of that. All the housework is left to me, and he doesn't even bother to take his dishes to the sink after meals. After he eats and bathes, he just goes straight to sleep. We couldn't even maintain a proper married life, and within a few months of marriage, we had to sleep in separate bedrooms. I've lived to this day without finding any value in being a couple. I've talked to my parents about my husband, but he acts like a good person in front of them. So no matter how much I talk about his sloppiness, they don't believe me. I was desperate every day because I thought that if things stayed as they are, the company my father runs would soon falter if my husband took over. My husband is not my only problem. My mother-in-law is also a source of stress for me. Since we started living near my husband's family home, my husband has said, make sure to visit Mom frequently. Apparently, my mother-in-law has a bad back. And it seems difficult for her to shop and do household chores alone. When I suggested hiring a helper, he replied, why hire someone when we have people who can do it without costing money? Showing his stingy side. It's not like I want to look after my in-laws for free. Moreover, my mother-in-law is quite a piece of work. A typical troublesome mother-in-law who complains about everything I do. When I clean, she tells me to redo it because there is still dust left. If I cook, she throws it away, saying to remake it because she doesn't like the taste. When I do laundry, she gives me nonsensical orders to wash each item by hand with care. The washing machine isn't for you to use. You are a daughter-in-law. Wash everything by hand with care. When I tried to use the washing machine and was scolded like that, I was truly astounded at what she was saying. My mother-in-law can't stand the thought of me having it easy. And if I neglect the household chores of my in-laws' home or try to use time-saving techniques, she yells, "Don't be lazy," and forbids that method. Really, when I came as a bride, there was none of this. Brides these days really have no grit. Watching my mother-in-law trying to resolve everything with a philosophy of grit, I felt she was so outdated. She lived in a different time and tries to impose that way of life on me, who lives in the present, trying to inflict the same hardships she endured. I had always felt that she was truly a person with a bad character, and I dreaded the time I had to spend with such a mother-in-law. To reduce the number of days I had to visit my in-laws' house, I diligently did their household chores every time I went, and I didn't even rebel when she complained. "I'm sorry." If I just quietly apologized to her, it would not rub my mother-in-law the wrong way. In addition to my husband, I had to put up with the troublesome person that was my mother-in-law. Every day was truly a struggle, and it was unbearable. One day, as usual, on my way back from my in-laws' house on my husband's orders, I suddenly felt something was off with my finger. When I looked at my finger, realizing the usual sensation was missing, I noticed that my wedding ring was gone. Trying to recall when I last saw it, I remembered taking it off to prepare dinner for my mother-in-law. I must have forgotten to put it back on after leaving it there. In a panic, I went back to my in-laws' house and explained the situation to my mother-in-law to let me in, but the ring was not where I remembered leaving it. "Mother-in-law, have you seen my ring here?" When I asked, my mother-in-law said, "No, it wasn't here." That couldn't be. If my memory was correct, it should be right there. Noticing that my mother-in-law's eyes were darting around, I sensed something was being hidden. "May I search the house since it's not here?" I asked, but my mother-in-law replied in a panic, "No, that's not allowed. It's a violation of privacy." It was clear that there was something she was troubled about being found if the house was searched. Yet, she claimed to not know where the ring was. In the end, I couldn't get permission from my mother-in-law that day, and was unable to search for the ring. And to make matters worse, my mother-in-law had contacted my husband to tell him the ring was lost. As soon as I got home, my husband, red-faced, berated me, "Is it true you lost the ring?" I desperately explained that it must be in the in-laws' house and that I wanted to search for it. But my mother-in-law would not allow it, yet my husband furiously accused me. "Are you blaming my mother?" and wouldn't listen to my side. "It definitely is at the in-laws' house. My mother-in-law has it. Even though I have this certainty and I've told him I will surely find it," my husband, possibly upset about the lost ring, lashed out at me with cruel words like, "You're a failure of a wife," or "You lack the awareness of being a wife." Saying things like that won't change that the ring is lost. "If it bothers you so much, help me look for it." Reaching my limit after being repeatedly scolded, I protested. And then my husband's face turned even redder as he yelled, "How dare you speak like that when you've lost it? You really are the worst wife. You can't even respect your own husband." After that, my husband even went as far as to contact my parents. However, when I explained the situation to my parents, they said, "We believe that Emily would never do such a thing," which gave me a little bit of encouragement. I am absolutely sure that my mother-in-law is involved in this. I have to prove it. Since that day, I've been desperately searching for the ring, but in the end, I couldn't find it. Then one day, my husband was supposed to go on a business trip for a week. While it's not uncommon for him to go on business trips, that day he said something unexpected. He told me that I don't need to take care of my mother-in-law while he is away on his trip. Even when I asked why, he just said, "I have my reasons," and nothing more. Although I suspected there was a hidden agenda, the thought of finally having some free time made me decide not to worry about it anymore. After my husband left for his trip, I spent time with friends I hadn't seen in a while and visited my parents, enjoying my life away from my husband and mother-in-law. Then one day, my father told me I can't find my card. Apparently, his gold card had been missing for a few days. Losing a card is a serious matter. I thought I had to contact the credit card company immediately. But then my phone rang with a call from my husband. Hello? I'm actually a bit busy right now. What's up? Emily? Guess where we are? We're in Hawaii. My husband laughed heartily. In the background, I could hear my mother-in-law's voice. I realized then that my husband had lied to me about going on a business trip, and had actually taken my mother-in-law on a trip to Hawaii. Emily, you're really careless. Leaving your card out in the living room like that. Confused by what my husband said over the phone, I tilted my head. After all, I don't even have a card. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. It's the gold card that was left in the living room. I've already spent $20,000 with it. Really, thanks to the president's daughter. I felt the blood drain from my face at his words. Struggling to keep my voice steady, I informed my husband. You shouldn't be using that. Annoyed by my response, he yelled, "Don't talk back to me," and hurled more terrible words at me. Did I do something wrong? A wife's money is my money, right? I could hear my mother-in-law saying, "Well said," on the other side of the phone. Then the phone was passed to my mother-in-law, and she said this. "Thank you for taking such good care of me, Emily. I am so happy right now." She laughed loudly and mockingly. Faced with their malevolence, I could only despair. No matter how much I tried to persuade them, they wouldn't listen at all. Firmly believing they were in the right. Feeling that the situation was hopeless, I decided to confront them with the truth. May I ask, whose credit card is that? Upon my question, my mother-in-law tilted her head in confusion. When my husband checked, he saw my father's name. Father-in-law's. My foolish husband apparently hadn't checked the cardholder's name. That gold card belongs to my father. He said it was lost, and he's been troubled by it. If it's there, that's a relief. I'll tell him to cancel the card. While I was calmly reporting this, I could hear my husband panicking. Are you serious? It was clear that if this came out, he would face my father's wrath. Please, I'm begging you. Talk to your father and cover for me. If this gets out, my position is in jeopardy too. Before he even apologized, he begged me, and I immediately answered, no. My husband was desperate, pleading, please, somehow. But in the end, this situation was the result of his own doing. Emily, please stop tormenting my son. You are really a nasty person. Worried about her son's apparent depression or perhaps not liking that I was in a position of power. My mother-in-law snatched the phone from my husband and yelled at me. What grudge do you have against my son? He was just trying to take care of me. It was also a good chance for you to be filial, wasn't it? Mother-in-law who are blind to their own faults insists that they are not to blame. I felt a certain cleanliness in her attitude. For now, I will have to report this to my father. I am not in a position to hide such things. Please convey to your son that he will probably hear from my father later, and good luck. Saying that, I hung up the phone. Even until the end, my mother-in-law was shouting, wait. But such things were no longer a threat to me. I immediately contacted my father afterward and informed him about my husband and mother-in-law using the card to make $20,000 worth of purchases, and how they showed no remorse, which infuriated my parents. Surely, when they return to the country, they will face a terrible fate. I eagerly awaited the scheduled return day, enjoying the remaining days without my husband and mother-in-law. As soon as my husband and mother-in-law returned, they kneeled before me. I am really sorry. Please, just don't report this to my father-in-law. Emily, I am really sorry. I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. My husband and mother-in-law tearfully apologized. It was clear they feared worsening relations with my father. I made them lift their heads once to show them something on my smartphone screen. It was a product page on a flea market app. There, a familiar ring was displayed. My wedding ring. A friend of mine found it. They asked me if this wasn't my ring. How could something that was supposed to be lost be listed like this? As I asked, my mother-in-law's face turned pale. Confused, my husband tilted his head. Actually, there were other things that were lost as well. Cosmetics, accessories, things like that. All of them were being sold by the owner of this account. Why does the owner of this account have things that I've lost? Perhaps my husband had some idea when he looked at his mother with suspicion and said, "Mom." Yes. It was me. She raised her voice, unable to escape reality and lie any longer. A daughter-in-law's things are mine. What's wrong with taking them and selling them? Isn't it just making good use of them? I just sighed at her brazenness. The mother-in-law was truly despicable. There's no excuse for selling other people's things. I'll be filing a police report on this. This conversation is being recorded, so it will serve as ample evidence. As soon as the word police came up, the mother-in-law began to panic. As if to help his mother, my husband shouted at me, calling the police is going too far. Too far? I don't think so. You, mother-in-law, have stolen and sold so many of my belongings, turning them into money for yourself. So you both are thieves, I added, and both my husband and mother-in-law were furious. But my revenge wasn't over yet. The last guest was still to come. The doorbell rang, announcing a visitor, leaving the two confused people behind. I invited into our home the person I had called for this very reason. Hello, it's been a while. Entering the house was my father. He had had a whopping $20,000 spent without his permission because of this incident. I thought it was time to have a proper discussion about it. Seeing my father, my mother-in-law and husband started to tremble. And then, they knelt down again. I am truly sorry. If I had known it was my father-in-law's card, I would never have done such a thing. Please forgive me. As my husband spoke, my father responded. So, if it was my daughter's property, you wouldn't have hesitated to use it? It's not good to steal from others and talk like that after the fact. After being spoken to harshly by my father, my husband fell silent. My son was just trying to be nice to me. That's all. Please, I beg you, forgive us. The mother-in-law pleaded with tears, trying to evoke sympathy. I cannot bring myself to forgive you for trying to find happiness by stealing from others. This incident has caused significant loss, and I will be claiming all of it. Their faces twisted at my father's words. They seemed utterly devastated. I left the house with my father. I would likely spend some time at my parents' home. I began the divorce proceedings with my husband with the help of my father. I also filed a police report against the mother-in-law's theft. My ex-husband was in financial trouble after being asked to repay the money he used from my father's card and being sued for damages by me. As for the ex-mother-in-law, at her age, she ended up in the care of the police and seems to be struggling to repay for the items she sold. According to what I heard from a friend, both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were overwhelmed with debt and couldn't manage their lives. They had to sell the house they were living in and still couldn't pay off the entire amount. And now they seem to be living in a shabby apartment, desperately trying to make ends meet. As for me, I'm working at my father's company while studying business management. thinking of taking over his legacy. Since the divorce had left me with no heir, I decided to take over the company myself. My father and I both agreed that it was a good idea, since the idea of a female president is old-fashioned in this day and age. And he doesn't seem to care much about that. Honestly, working while studying is quite challenging. There are times when I feel that no amount of hands would be enough. But I am determined to keep striving in my own way.
It's Daddy. What? Laura and I were very surprised, because it was my husband who was there. What is this all about? Seeing my face, which had realized everything, my husband was very agitated. No, it's not like that. There's no escaping this now. My name is Laura, a 34-year-old office worker. I have been married to my husband Joseph for 7 years. We were originally classmates in college. We were in the same department and had many opportunities to talk because we were in the same seminar. We naturally got closer as we spent a lot of time together as students. In our senior year of college, we started dating. We shared job hunting information and encouraged each other, which drew us closer. As job-seeking students, we couldn't spend much time like lovers at first, but it was still fun. Seeing each other work hard in job hunting was stimulating, and we managed to proceed with job hunting while taking good breaks. Fortunately, we both got jobs at the same time. Then, we enjoyed our time as lovers to the fullest, having restrained ourselves until then. Since we had almost completed our credits, we only had our theses left. So, we traveled, went on drives, and created lots of memories. After graduating, we both became working adults. Initially, we prioritized getting used to our jobs and did not force dates or meetings. I think that decision was very good. Meeting when we were stressed often led to fights over trivial things. So, we decided to meet when we both wanted to. This made our time together enjoyable and a good break from work. 3 years later, as we got used to our jobs, we started living together. It had been 3 years since we started dating, and we were considering marriage. So we decided to live together and try sharing our lives. Our cohabitation went smoothly, and we spent happy times together. Then, 2 years later, he proposed to me. We've been dating for 5 years, and I still love you, Laura. So, will you marry me? I feel the same way. Thank you for proposing. I look forward to our future together. That's how we decided to get married. It had been 5 years since we started dating and 2 years since we started living together. But getting married was a significant step. Even after being together for a long time, our newlywed life was fresh. I was always excited, and there were many moments when I realized we were married. At work, we used different surnames, but usually I went by my husband's surname, which startled me every time I was called by it. Being called by his surname made me realize I was married to him. We enjoyed our newlywed life while feeling the joy of being a couple. Our lifestyle didn't change much from when we were cohabiting, but the sensation was quite different knowing we were married. Then, something very joyous happened between us. That was the news of a child. About 2 years into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. Joseph, I'm pregnant. Really? Yes, it's our child. Yes, thank you, Laura. My husband was very happy about my pregnancy, and I was too. Then, after that, I safely gave birth to a baby. A healthy girl was born. The child that was born was so cute and truly like an angel. This child is our treasure. She's really adorable. My husband said this joyfully while holding our daughter. We named this child Alyssa. Alyssa was really cute, and both my husband and I were completely doting parents. I was using my full maternity and parental leave, so I could be with my daughter all the time. Also, my husband, having work, would come home right after his shift ended. We spent all our time entertaining our daughter, and because of that, even our dinner time was delayed. We were living such happy days. Every time our daughter started to crawl or walk, we were overjoyed and took lots of videos and photos. Alyssa grew up quickly and started to speak. Mama, Papa. Alyssa, you're so cute. You can call us now. Every time our daughter achieved something, we were thrilled. We were complete parent fools. But that feeling was happiness. I was glad that my husband was active in parenting. I thought again how glad I was to have married him. Then, Alyssa started nursery school. As my parental leave ended and I was restarting work, we had to send her to nursery. Then, my husband and I decided that whoever finished work earlier would pick her up. When our work ended around the same time, we would pick her up together and go home as a family of 3. Today at nursery, this happened. Wow, that's great. Our daughter, walking between my husband and me, happily told us about her day at nursery while holding our hands. It was fun for my husband and me to listen to our daughter's stories on the way home. We were a happy family, spending our days together. I thought we would surely continue to live a happy life like this. But a little while later, my husband's work became busy, and he started to do a lot of overtime. Because of that, I mostly became the one to pick up Alyssa. Isn't Daddy coming to pick me up recently? Yes, he's working very hard. So let's support him, okay? Yes, I'll support Daddy. My daughter was such a good child, writing a supportive letter for her father. Daddy, good luck with your work, she wrote in the letter, which she placed next to his dinner, prepared for when he came home. Recently, my husband often comes home after Alyssa has already gone to sleep. But when he returned from work and saw the letter while eating dinner, he was moved. Alyssa, what a kind, good child. I want to hug her right now. No, you can't wake her up now. Haha. Right. Really, she's such a good and cute child. Can I just go see her sleeping face? Make sure not to wake her up with the hallway light. Yeah. My husband said this and happily went to Alyssa's room to secretly watch her sleeping face. I was happy to see how much he truly cherished our daughter. That's why I think it's really unfortunate that my husband is so busy with work and we have so little family time. My husband often has to work on Saturdays too, so we hardly ever get to go out and play. Sorry, Alyssa. Daddy has to work today too? So, will you be back by tonight? Well, I'll try to make it back for dinner. Then I'll wait for you to come home. Good luck with your work. My husband would say this and go off to work. But sometimes he made it back for dinner and sometimes he didn't. When he couldn't make it, our daughter looked so sad, and it made me sad every time. But it's work, so it can't be helped. I hope our daughter will come to understand this eventually. As both my husband and I start to take on more responsible roles at our companies, our overtime is likely to increase. I hope she can be patient during those times. Of course, I want to spend lots of time with my family. But I also want her to gradually build up a tolerance to situations like this. When we are together, I want to spend as much time as possible with her. I think my husband feels the same way. But even then, I felt that he was too busy lately. So, I decided to talk to him about it. Hey, aren't you doing too much overtime lately? Can't you delegate some of your work to others and try to come home earlier? No, that's impossible. I'm relied upon by the company, and my superiors and juniors are counting on me. I see. But I'm always home on Sundays, and I do spend time with Alyssa then, right? That's true, but Alyssa often feels lonely. I'm sorry about that. Well, I'll try to get my juniors to handle more work. Yeah, please do that. My husband said he would, but in the end, nothing changed. I gradually stopped expecting much from him. Well, it can't be helped since he's busy, and it's not like he doesn't love our daughter. So I thought I'd give her plenty of attention in his stead. And then our daughter turned 5 and started learning the piano. She seemed to like the sound of the piano when watching music shows. She said she wanted to try it, so I immediately enrolled her in a piano class. There were many children of her age there, and surprisingly, a classmate from the same nursery was also there. This child was Sarah, who, although in a different class, went to the same nursery as my daughter. I became friends with Sarah's mom, and we shared our parenting struggles and sympathized with each other, enjoying our time while waiting for our daughter's piano lessons to end. My daughter became quite close with Sarah, and I was glad I had her join the piano class. Little did I know what would happen next. From then on, Sarah's mom and I would chat even on days we were picking up our children from nursery when there were no piano lessons. My daughter seemed to visit Sarah in her different class at the nursery. Sarah was a very nice child and kind to my daughter. I was glad she could happily go to nursery, having made a good friend. Amidst all this, one day I received a message from Sarah's mom. She had an emergency and couldn't pick up her daughter, so she asked if I could pick them both up. That day, after nursery, they had a piano lesson. So I was supposed to pick them up and then head straight to the piano class. Sarah's mom had told me that she could only come to the piano class midway, so she wanted me to take Sarah with me. There was no problem with that, so I agreed and went to pick up Sarah and my daughter, Alyssa, from the nursery. It seemed that the nursery had already been informed by Sarah's mom about the arrangement. Then, I left the nursery with both girls. It was an extremely hot day, and the kids looked very hot and tired. Since we had a bit of time before the piano lesson, I decided to stop by a convenience store to buy ice cream for the kids. We then went to a nearby park, sat on a bench, and ate ice cream together. The kids were happily eating their ice cream. Then we took a different route than usual to the piano class. That's when Sarah pointed somewhere and said, "It's Daddy." What? Alyssa and I were very surprised, because it was my husband, Joseph, who was there. "Daddy." Sarah ran towards my husband, shouting. It looked like my husband was just coming out of a nearby building, apparently having been on an outside work assignment. I understood everything from Sarah's remark. It must be that my husband had been visiting Sarah's house often, and that meant he was having an affair with Sarah's mom. I slowly approached my husband. My husband noticed me and Alyssa and looked shocked. "What is this all about? Why is Sarah calling you Daddy?" Seeing my face, which had realized everything, Joseph was very agitated. No, it's not like that. There's no escaping this now. Confess everything. Faham. Never mind. We have a piano lesson now, so we'll talk when we get home. I glared at my husband with a fearful look. My husband was pale and silent. On the way to the piano class, I asked Sarah about the man. Is that man really your daddy, Sarah? Yeah, he stays with me from the evening until late at night. I see. Do you have dinner together? Yes, but Daddy doesn't eat much. Then he puts me to bed. Apparently, my husband wasn't working overtime but was visiting Sarah's house every day. Both Alyssa and I were shocked by this revelation. It was too much for Alyssa. I dropped Sarah off at the piano class and told the teacher that Alyssa seemed a bit unwell. So we were going home. Then, I decided to go to my parents' house and take care of Alyssa with them. I had already explained everything to my parents over the phone, so they knew the situation. Did Daddy care more about Sarah than me? Alyssa. As I was struggling to respond to Alyssa, my father spoke up. Daddy did something very bad. It's unforgivable. So, you don't need to be valued by such a bad person. You have Mommy, and you also have Grandpa and Grandma. We think of you as the most important. Don't forget that we are here for you, Alyssa. When my father kindly said that, my daughter Alyssa nodded through her tears, saying, Yeah. Then, perhaps overwhelmed by the shock of everything, she fell asleep from exhaustion. I immediately contacted my husband and told him I wanted to talk. My husband agreed, so I decided to go to the house where my husband and I lived. I also called his parents to join us. I left Alyssa in the care of my mother and went to my husband with my father. My husband had invited Sarah's mom, but he seemed extremely agitated. Probably not expecting my father and his parents to be there. Why are Dad and my father-in-law here? Oh, is there something inconvenient about that? If what's happening isn't an affair, shouldn't you be more confident? Well, that's... Joseph, tell us the truth. Dad. My husband's face stiffened under my father-in-law's stern gaze. Do you know what happens if you lie? As my father said that, my husband turned pale and was visibly shaken. Well, my husband stammered, and then his mother-in-law snapped. Speak up properly. My husband let out a small gasp and almost fell from his chair. Realizing he couldn't lie his way out of this situation, my husband confessed everything. It turns out, just as Sarah had said, my husband was visiting Sarah's mom and having an affair with her. The affair started when I couldn't attend a parent-teacher meeting due to work. They hit it off, exchanged contacts, and eventually entered into an affair. Sarah's mom was a single mother, apparently having had Sarah in a situation where the father was absent due to personal circumstances. She had been managing on her own but became increasingly overwhelmed. Finding comfort in talking with my husband, she eventually entered into a relationship with him. My husband, though knowing it was wrong, couldn't end the affair. He found Sarah cute, loved Alyssa, and couldn't decide what to do. Finally, when he cried and pleaded, not wanting to lose either, my love for him vanished. Do you think that kind of thinking is acceptable? I'm divorcing you, and I will take custody of Alyssa. Whether she sees you in the future is up to her. But, if I'm her father, I have a right to see her. Then you shouldn't have had an affair in the first place. After his mother-in-law yelled at him, my husband finally fell off the chair. As he sat on the floor looking hurt, I coldly told him, "You betrayed me and Alyssa. Now you'll receive the punishment you deserve." My husband, pale-faced, hung his head in defeat. Later, through a lawyer, I divorced him and sued both him and Sarah's mom for property division. Of course, I also demanded child support from my husband. My ex-husband, unable to pay property division and child support, couldn't continue living with Sarah's mom. Given his salary, it was impossible for him to repay debts and support another child. Sarah's mom eventually left him, taking Sarah back to her parents' house. Consequently, Sarah changed nurseries, and I no longer encountered them when picking up Alyssa, which was a relief. As for my ex-husband, he was abandoned by both his mistress and me and cut off by his parents. Now, he lives a lonely life, paying off his debts. Meanwhile, Alyssa and I started living together, just the two of us. Alyssa seems to have no lingering attachment to my ex-husband and never mentions Daddy anymore. She doesn't want to meet him, so my ex-husband has lost the chance to see her again. I'm relieved to see Alyssa still enjoying nursery, as I was worried about her emotional well-being after all this. As a single mother, I'm determined to prioritize Alyssa while working hard at both my job and parenting.